So welcome Donald and Aria and Alex and Warren and Guadalupe and Constance. Thanks for showing up. This is the week 11 webinar. It's our very last webinar of the entire course. And the plan today is we'll go over some of chapter 13, the part of chapter 13 that you're responsible for, which is definitely not all of it. And that'll be a part of the webinar, but not necessarily most of it. Even though it sounds like a whole chapter, it's the easiest chapter that we do. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the final exam. And we'll spend some time talking about how to study for the final exam, you know, how to prepare, what are good strategies, good websites to go to and find, which I placed some for you that should help you out. So that is the plan. In terms of, at this point, I'd like to give you the calendar of what's going on. So today's our webinar. And again, this is our last webinar of the entire quarter. And just to let you know, if you've missed any of the webinars, it's 5% off for the course grade if you missed a webinar and didn't repeat it or didn't.
Having that same language, and also, you know, her having her own.
And so anyhow, so again, today is the webinar. Wednesday, and some of you already have dealt with it. By Wednesday, you must send me the proctor, the final exam information quiz. So that is due by Wednesday so that I can get the final exams out to your proctors. For most of you, this will be very easy. All you have to do is go in there, you type in the date you're taking it, and you say the word same. That means you're taking it with the same proctor. Most people take the same proctor, but if you happen to be in a different place than you were at the midterm, or something happened or didn't work out with your proctor, you can find a different proctor, and that's fine too. Also, I am happy to, if you can't locate a proctor where you are, I'm happy to help and send you some suggested links on places that might proctor. Again, my go-to places are libraries. Public libraries often proctor. Not all of them, but most of them do. They tend to be free. At least I think so. No one's actually told me about a price, but no one has said, if I can't afford it, it might be free. And then also colleges often do proctoring. So your local community college, whether you're there or not, many of them will do proctoring. Some won't if you're not their student. Some will, depending on the college or university. The other is private tutoring. So that's the third place, kind of the main three. And they do proctoring, but they usually charge a lot of money. So just a warning. So that is Wednesdays. You have to let me know who your proctor is, what information so I can send the proctor the exam. Because if I can't send the proctor exam, you can't take the exam. As simple as that. And that's due by Wednesday so that I have enough time to, get it all set up. And I will send it right away, basically. I haven't sent any yet. I do have it. It's written. It's done. But I usually send it on Wednesday. I usually do one Wednesday morning and then Thursday. And then anyone who hasn't done it yet, then I harass you and say, you got to do it or you can't pass this class. And then on Thursday is your discussion post is due. This is the easiest discussion post of the entire quarter. So if you do it late, it just means that you're not on top of things at all. Again, there's no excuse. So get this done. You could have done it yesterday. You could do it today. It doesn't ask for any statistics. It's just a happiness kind of thing. So, and again, replying, this is the one you can reply to many people because you're not taking away anything from anyone by replying to people, and you'll see when you get there. That's due Thursday. And then on Sunday, we'll be the chapter 13 assignment. It's also a very short assignment. It's the easiest one of the quarter probably. And again, so is your reply to one of your classmates on the discussion post. That also is easy. You can do that, tomorrow if there's some up there to do. So again, it's not the hard week in terms of new material or anything like that. But what's looming is a week from Wednesday or earlier, you must have taken the final exam. Late is not okay, actually. So late means that you get an F or an incomplete for the course, and you don't want that. So you have to take it by Wednesday. Tuesday's fine, Monday's fine, even later this week is just fine, as long as you let me know. You know, if you want to take it Wednesday, you better let me know now where you're going to take it so I can send it to the person, because otherwise I'm waiting till Wednesday to send. So just let you know that you can take the final earlier. The only thing is, if you take it too early, then if you haven't already prepared, you haven't studied enough, probably. You haven't practiced enough. So that is the plan. And then after Wednesday, class is over. So after that, I'll be submitting your grades. I'll be grading on that Wednesday and Thursday, probably. I often get a lot Wednesday evening. And then my hope is that Thursday of next week, I'll have grades submitted. Okay. Unfortunately, it usually takes a college a week or so to get it on your transcripts. I can't do anything about it. I'm on top of things, but sometimes it just takes time. So hopefully you understand that. So that is the schedule for the rest of the quarter, because there's not much left. And again, today is our last webinar of the entire quarter. It doesn't mean that, you know, I am going to all of a sudden be off the grid and you can never talk to me again tomorrow and the next day. But I will let you know on Friday and Saturday of this week, I'm pretty much off the grid. I'll probably check check the course once a day in the early morning, and that's it. I have a big conference that I'm on the conference committee, and I'm working on this committee, so I'm pretty much busy all day long, Friday and Saturday. So that's just a note. You're not going to get much help Friday and Saturday, and Sunday I'm driving back, so that takes a long time too. So if it takes a little while over the weekend, you'll understand. But I'll be at least checking my email once a day on those 3 days. So hopefully that doesn't hinder too much. Okay. Are there any questions before I jump into the chapter 13 ideas? And about the final, I'll be going over a review for that. So if it's particulars about the final, wait on that. If there's any other questions? Okay, if there's no questions, I want to mention what we're doing today, the last chapter. I'm only doing part of it, as I mentioned. I want to mention it by kind of going over the hypothesis testing that we've already done and see what's left, and that's what we're doing today. Okay, I mean, there's some other things left too, but one major thing that we haven't done yet. So we started out, if you remember, we did a hypothesis test for a single population mean. We did a hypothesis test for a single population proportion. Okay, that's how we started. That was actually chapter 9. So when you had, so the first thing you say is, well, how many different, are we doing a comparison study or are we not doing a comparison study? If you're not doing a comparison study, okay, and it's not regression analysis, then it's going to be chapter 9 stuff. Then you say, is it a yes, no, or is it a quantitative, right, a number answer for the survey question? If it is comparison, then if you remember, if we were comparing 2 things, so that might be 2 groups and their answers to 2 groups, or 2 questions and the answers to 2 questions, then that was chapter 10. And that was we did hypothesis testing for comparing 2 proportions. And we did hypothesis testing for comparing 2 independent sample means. And we did hypothesis testing for comparing 2 dependent sample means. Not sample means, population means. Okay, then we moved on and we said, well, what if we have qualitative data? And then if you remember, we had 3 different tests for that. We had a goodness of fit test. We had a homogeneity test. And then we also had a test for independence. And that was when you had multiple quantitative variables you were comparing. Then we moved on and we did regression analysis. And that's when you want to use one quantitative variable to make a prediction about a second one. And then we did regression analysis to find out, we did a hypothesis test to find out if the correlation was 0 or if there was a correlation. Okay, what's left? What haven't I mentioned yet? And that's what I'm about to do. What haven't we done yet? In terms of studies, any thoughts? I don't see y'all jumping in, but what haven't we talked about? Because that's today's stuff. I see you all jumping in at once. If you're tired, I'm not sure. I know it's been a long Thanksgiving week, but hopefully you're, got lots of vitality because you had your rest. Any thoughts? All right, if you don't jump in, I'll just say it. Okay, I was hoping. No, yeah, but that's a name. You just don't know the name of the chapter, ANOVA. That means nothing unless you know what it's about. Yeah, 3 sample sizes, and in particular, 3 or more, by the way, when you have three populations and all of them have quantitative variables, or more than 3, okay? It could be 50. So if you want to make comparisons between multiple populations and you want to find out if they're all the same or not, then we're going to do what's called ANOVA. And that is what we're doing today. Okay, and that's the last thing we're doing. Are there other tests? Of course, but we're not doing every test there is in the world. There's hundreds of others, but we're doing the basic ones. Okay, I want to give you a very big warning. Is by the end of the week of the course, you're going to think you know ANOVA pretty well. You don't. You won't. You're going to know how to put in your calculator. You're going to know how to write a hypothesis, H0 and an H1, how to write a conclusion. But there's a whole lot more to ANOVA that we're not doing in this class. And in fact, that's done in like an advanced statistics class, which this is not what it is. So right now we're just gonna like pretend like we understand ANOVA. Sound good? All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna jump to an example. Okay, so here's the example. And what it says is, suppose that a study was done to analyze the racial differences for the distance in miles that people live from the nearest public library. Okay, interesting study, Does it matter, do certain races tend to live close to a library? Maybe not. Maybe it's completely independent of races. Okay, the data from the study is shown below. Okay, and here's some data. Notice that the survey question is, how far do you live from the library in miles? And the person would answer something like, I live 3 miles from the nearest public library, okay, whatever they might say. Okay, and then A is, what assumptions must you make in order to perform an ANOVA test? And B is, do the test. Any questions on the question? Okay, I want to mention something that's pretty important to make sure that you don't get too confused, and that is ANOVA stands for analysis of variance, but in this class you'll have no idea why, and I'm not going to tell you. But I will tell you that deep within your calculator there's some variances going on, but we're not going to expand at all on what's going on mathematically behind the scenes. But we are going to play with the calculator and let the calculator do the work. And if you want to learn the mathematics, you need to take a different course, an advanced upper division kind of math course in statistics. We don't do that. Okay, so the first thing is, what assumptions must you make? And some of the assumptions are the same assumptions that you're used to. What's one of the big assumptions that you're used to having to make when you do a hypothesis test? Any thoughts? Yeah, normal distribution. And notice here in this example, there's 4 different distributions. There's the distributions for whites, distributions for blacks, distributions for Hispanics, and the distribution for the other races. Does that make sense? So in terms of the assumptions, one of them is the 4 distributions. And I'm going to write sampling distributions. Are all the same, are all normal. Any questions on that? Okay. Notice, by the way, in this particular example, why can't we use a central limit theorem to say that they're all normal? What's wrong with that? Any thoughts? This is something that we've already kind of encountered before. So what's wrong with saying by the central limit theorem, we're doing sampling distributions, so they're normal? So any thoughts? What's the problem? What's the problem with that? Yeah, and I'm gonna actually, Ari, I'm gonna say a couple things. Is your grammar is not right. It's n's are not all greater than 30. So you look at each of the n's. There's an n for whites. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whites, and that is not greater than 30. We have 4 blacks, not greater than 30. We have 6 Hispanics, and we have 4 others. None of those numbers are greater than 30. So we're going to have to make this assumption for all 4 of the distributions. Okay, which is probably wrong, but again, I just wanted to give you an example, and I also don't want to spend all day typing into a calculator. In the real world, you want bigger sample sizes so that this is not an issue. Okay, what's another assumption that you sometimes have to make? Or you always have to make? Any thoughts? Qualitative, well, first thing is not qualitative. Quantitative is not an assumption because it is qualitative. Does that make sense? So that's something we know is true. If you know it's true, it's not an assumption. Right, here are, we can see the numbers in the table. So this is quantitative. So that's not an assumption, that's just a fact. Do you see the difference? Okay, all right, the hint is think chapter 1. And again, since the finals exam's coming, you got to remember all the chapters. What do we do in chapter 1? Very beginning of this class. It's been months. You remember? Yep, something about it, but actually before it's descriptive statistics. That was chapter 2 was descriptive statistics. This is chapter 1. Okay, if you don't remember, maybe I'll say it. We have to make sure there's no bias. Okay, that this is an unbiased study. In particular, the easiest way of doing that is simple random sampling. I'll write SRS for that. Okay, so we have an unbiased study. Very hard to do, but you could try. And you could do it with all kinds of techniques, but you got to make sure that you don't have bias. Okay, let me give you some more things that you have to, that you may not get. Unbiased study is an assumption every type of study that you ever do in statistics. If you have bias, you just can't do anything. Okay, if you have bad bias. Okay, another one that we have to have is the standard deviations are all the same. I can write similar. If they're close, that's good enough. Okay, and again, that's something that you're not going to ever in this class learn about. But if you take an advanced statistics class, you'll learn how to decide whether the standard deviations are all similar or not. Right now, I just want you to know that that's an assumption. Any questions on that? Okay, then there's 2 others that are much easier to deal with. One is that the survey was independent. And that just means that you didn't do the survey and have a big group of people in a room, do a shout out, and then towards the end, because some people heard what other people said, they changed their mind. That would make it dependent. So that's usually pretty easy. And the fourth is that the samples, right, of blacks, whites, Hispanics, and others, we're all collected in the same way. Right, each collected in the same way. So let me give you an idea of where that comes about. And it has to do, I don't think I ever told you guys, one of my very first jobs, okay, after reading to a kindergartner and being a paper boy, was actually working in a market research company called Carroll Davis Market Research. And this is like a professional job, and you'll never guess that I was 11 years old. And we had a team of people. Believe it or not, I was some 11-year-old kid calling on the phone doing surveys. Isn't that funny? And now I'm doing this. So it just, stuff happens. I think nowadays the boss probably would have been arrested for letting me work, but things were different in the old days. So I did that. And one of the things that happened is that before we started making the phone calls, the boss would come to the group of people that were all making phone calls and give us what we have to do and what we have to say so that we're all saying the same thing in terms of the way we do our surveys. So that's what it means to say the samples were each collected in the same way. Okay, and that happens, most professional surveys are done with a team, not with one person. So when you have a team, you got to make sure everyone on the team is collecting in the same way. Any questions on that? Okay, so those are the 5 big assumptions. Any questions so far about the assumptions? All right, I may have to, let's see, I wonder if I can move, well, I'll move most of it over there. You can't see much, but I need the space. All right, so now what I need to do is now we want to show the details of the ANOVA test. So I want to do a little reminder, and this is very important for the final exam. If it's a chapter 9 or chapter 10 hypothesis test, then the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis use symbols only. Do you remember that? Things like mu equals 7, or maybe P1 is less than P2. Do you remember those kind of tests? It's been a little while, but that was the chapter 9 and chapter 10 type of tests. For chapter 11 tests, we were looking at qualitative data, and if you remember, the H0 and H1 were described using a sentence and not using symbols, no symbols. Okay, for chapter 12, every hypothesis test in this class is exactly the same. H0 is rho equals 0, and H1 is rho is not equals 0 in symbols. Now we're in chapter 13, and for chapter 13, it turns out H0 is in symbols. So let me use a brush for that because we've got symbols to do. So we have H0 colon, that's the same. And here we have 4 different means, mu1, mu2, mu3, mu4. So we do mu1 equals mu2 equals mu3 equals mu4. Okay, you could also do mu W equals mu B equals mu H equals mu O, you know, just kind of describing it. And that's H0. So notice symbols. Okay, and it's always going to be the means are the same. Sometimes there'll be 4 of them, sometimes there'll be 3, sometimes there'll be 6. You know, in the real world, you could have 50. When might you have 50? Any thoughts where 50 comes up? And it definitely does. You could even do a very similar study to this one, and you'll end up with 50. I'll see y'all jumping in. Let's suppose you wanted to see if the distance people live from the library, if what state you're in is a factor, right? I'm in California. I know we have someone, I think, in Colorado here. Okay, I'm trying to remember who it was, but someone's in Colorado. We could have in all kinds of different states. And we have 50 states in the United States. So that would be a mu1, mu2, and you probably do ... mu equals mu 50. Okay, and that would be very plausible. And you'd be comparing those. Okay, then there's H1. And this is where it gets a little bit tough. If you tried to do this in symbols, you would probably all fail. Okay, you just can't do it. What you can't do is mu1 not equal to mu2, not equal to mu3, not equal to mu4. What's wrong with that? Why is that doesn't work for H1? You just turn all the equals into not equals. Because that's what you did, for example, in two-sample t-test. When you had a two-tailed test, you just say mu1 not equal to mu2, and that worked. What's wrong with turning the equals into not equals? Any thoughts? All right, I don't see it, but here's the deal. The deal is if H0 is false, it could be that maybe mu2 and mu3 are the same, but maybe mu4 and mu1 are different. Does that make sense? Or maybe it's mu2 and mu4 are different, and the others are the same. Okay? Maybe they're all different. You really don't know. There's all kinds of different combinations of being different. So instead, my strong recommendation is you write it H1 in words. H not in symbols, H1 in words. So here's the words. And the way you write it is at least 2 of the population means population mean distances from the nearest library differ by race. Okay, so it might be that Hispanics and others are different. You really don't know just from having an H1. Any questions? Have I lost anyone? Any questions? Okay, the next thing you do, and hopefully you should be used to this in hypothesis testing, is you think about what is a good level of significance here. And the key is this is a sociology question, right? What do sociologists always use for level of significance? Pretty much, almost always. Yeah, what standard? I'm looking for number. Yeah, sociologists pretty much always use 0.05. So we're going to use a level of significance of 0.05. All right, the next thing, and this is you're very used to doing this, is we go to our calculator. So let me do a new share, and let's go to our calculator. And the good thing is it's actually pretty easy to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit stat. You're all used to that. I'm going to go to edit. Then I'm going to erase. I need to erase L1, L2. I need to erase basically the first 4 L's because I'm going to use them all. So go clear, enter, L2, clear, enter, L3, clear, enter. Then I'm going to put in my data. So we had 15, and then 4, and then 11, and then 9, 3, and 2. And then we had 12. We had 1, 6, and 6. And then we had 9, 17, 5. Then we had 14, 7, 1. And then we had 18, 11, 2, 8. Any questions on getting the data in? You should be comfortable with this because you've been doing this kind of thing for a while now. All right, then I go stat again, and you're used to this too. We go to tests. We're at the end of the class, right? Any guess on where the ANOVA test is going to be residing? Yeah, very bottom. So don't hit the down arrow, hit the up arrow. That'll take you to ANOVA. One click on the up arrow, you're right there. So we go the up arrow, hit enter on ANOVA. And this one actually looks a lot different. It's pretty easy to use though. This one doesn't go to a menu, which is kind of interesting. I don't know what the people in Texas were thinking when they programmed this, but they decided to make this one, unlike all the other tests, not menu-based. Here it just says ANOVA parenthesis. What I do is I go second 1, and that goes L1. Then I hit the comma button, then second 2 for L2, and then comma. We have 4 of these, so we need to go second 3, comma, and then second 4 to get to the 4th one, and then end the parenthesis. Any questions at all on this so far? Okay, then we go ahead and hit enter. Any questions on the technology? Okay, so now we look at our F. Okay, this is new to us. This is a new test statistic called the F statistic. We've had a lot of statistics already. We've had binomial, we've had uniform, we've had normal, we've had T, we've had chi-squared, and now we have F. You don't have to know anything about the mathematics behind F, but you just have to know that if I ask you for the test statistic, you're looking for this F, which is 0.387. The next one, you should all know what this tells us, where it says P equal about 0.49. What is that? It says P equals 0.49. What does that tell you? Yeah, that's the P value. And that's the most important number of the whole class, right? These P values that we have. When you have a P value like 0.49, what's the conclusion? Yep, we're going to fail to reject. So now let's write down the conclusion in a full sentence. So what we can say, how about in green? There is statistically insignificant evidence to make a conclusion whether or not, and I'm going to say race is a factor in distance from the library, from the nearest public library. Any questions on that? Okay, so in research, they'll often talk about something being a factor of something else. So if race is a factor, that means knowledge of one's race tells you something about how far they might live from the library. Okay, doesn't mean you know exactly how far, but it means that it matters. Okay, you have information if you know the race. Okay, and this would be used if you wanted to like have fairness, for example, and wanted to make sure that we weren't discriminating based on race in terms of library placements in cities or wherever. Does that make sense? And you'd use ANOVA for that. And if you have a p-value like 0.49 like we had, then you say we don't have any evidence about any race issues with distance from public libraries. Whereas if you had a p-value of say 0.0001, then you would say, yeah, it matters which race you're in terms of how far you are to the nearest public library. Does that make sense? Here's what we're not doing in this class. We are not going further if you have a low p-value and say which ones are not equal. All we're doing is saying at least 2 are not equal, okay, if you end up having a low p-value, and you can't say anything more. If you want to learn more about how you figure out which race is the issue, if we had a low p-value, you would have to take another stats class, an advanced statistics. Any questions at all on ANOVA? Any questions? All right, so what I'm going to say now is, get a good color, that works, is we're really done with this class at this point, okay? In terms of material, there's nothing left, there's no new material left for me to talk about, which means I can tell you the secret word. And the secret word is thank you. So I want to thank you for being patient, you know, not like getting really angry, at least not showing me you're really angry at me in these webinars or any other time. So thank you is the secret word. And that'll be the secret word, the last secret word of the entire class. Okay, so what I want to do now is talk about the final exam. And as I mentioned, I want to spend a lot of time talking about the final, and there's not too much time to worry about this new material. Do you agree the new material doesn't look too bad? Yeah, it's not too bad. Any guess? This is going to be a tough question, possibly. What do you think the hardest part about chapter 13 is? About question that I might give you on a final exam that's an ANOVA question. Any guess on what the hardest part is? Because it's going to lead me into the final exam review. Written answer? No, because that's basically just rewriting the alternative hypothesis. That's actually not that hard. Yeah, Aria's got it. Figure out what test to use. Knowing to even do ANOVA, that it's not some other test that you have to do. That's the hardest part. Okay, and that, I'm going to spend a lot of time today talking about that in reviewing for the final. Do you agree that that's going to be a tough one? We've had a lot of tests now, and you got to know which one to use. All right, so what I want to do is I want to reshare, but now we're going to go into our Canvas shell. Okay, so here's a Canvas shell, and I'm going to do a few things. One, I want to show you something that you can use as a piece of a study guide. There's a lot of things you're going to want to study, which is practice. One is if you go to week 8, and you will see midterm 201 key. And if you click on that, that'll give you a key to the midterm you took. Some of you have probably already looked at it. If you haven't, here it is. And what I recommend doing is reworking out all these problems, because these were highlights from the first 2/3 of the class. So that's definitely something you should do. All these problems you had to do once before. Some of you were successful on, some of you were not successful. But you need to become successful if you want to do well in the final. And if you were successful, that means you need to just practice a little more to make sure you didn't forget it all. Okay, it means you knew it once, but it doesn't mean you still know it. Any questions on that? Okay, so that's one thing I put up there as a nice little practice that you can do. Okay, now let's leave week 8. And let's go to week 12, which is next week, the comprehensive final. So the first thing that I recommend doing is go to this final structure. And what I did, something similar to what I did for the midterm exam, is I took your final exam, which, by the way, I think I have it. By the way, this is the real final exam. And here's page 1. You can all see it? Okay, so that's page 1 of the final exam. By the way, here's page 1 of the final exam. I didn't change anything. And this is really important, and that is figuring out what test to use. But that's all you have to do, is I give you an example, and you have to figure out what test to use. Does that make sense? And there's going to be an A through I, and there's 15 different choices for each of them. So there's a lot of choices. So that's question 1 on the final exam. It's a biggie, and it's a lot of points. Okay, if you can't do that, not only won't you get question 1, but there's a lot of other questions you'll get wrong because you won't know what test to use. So that's how you want to start in practicing for this exam. And I'll show you something that I wrote for practicing that'll help you. Question number 2 says circle either true or false, A through I. There's 9 true-false questions. Okay, and again, I'll show you some practice you can do for that. Question number 3 is state the null and alternative hypothesis. So it says, by the way, it first says paragraph. That means you're going to have to read a paragraph. Then you're going to have to write down the null and alternative hypothesis, find the test statistic and the p-value, state the conclusion, either a type 1 or type 2 error is relevant, determine which one and state the repercussions, damage done if the error were to happen. So you got to tell me damage done, not just a definition of the error, but what damage will be done. If there's no damage, it's not an error. Okay, and then finally, was the sample size large enough? Question 4. Question 4 I want to mention is really important. So a lot of you had trouble with this. And that is, for each, write down the distribution, sketch the diagram, answer the question, and determine if the normality assumption was needed. Okay, so for each of these parts, A and B, how many different things do you have to do? Maybe I'll even make it bigger so you can see it. That might have helped. I'm not sure if that helped. Did that help? Yeah, notice there's 4 different things to do in each of these parts. Where have you seen something like question 4 before? Yeah, that was a midterm. So guess what? It's back. So I want to let you know, and it's always disappointing for me. I don't know what else I can do. Maybe you can give me suggestions. How do I make everyone know that it's 4 parts other than telling you it's 4 parts, reminding you now, having it written here? But there will be 4 parts to do, and if you don't do all 4 parts, then you don't get full credit. And if you didn't have enough time, it might mean that you haven't practiced enough to get quick at it. And that's the idea. So you need to practice some more if you're running out of time, so you get quicker. Okay. For the GRC, you have to ask them. If they say yes, then I give you more time. That's the way it is. Okay. Any questions on this one? Again, you have it in the midterm. You can go back to the midterm. You can look at my solution, and it's got 4 parts. Question 5. 5 is a little ambiguous. It's something from chapter 3, 4, or 5, I'm not telling you which one. So study them all. Question 6 is a confidence interval question. So you can guess you're going to have to write a confidence interval. You can do some stuff with confidence intervals, etc. Question 7 is a hypothesis test question. Okay, similar to the other hypothesis test question. Question number 3, not exactly the same, but similar. This one I don't ask about the type 1 and 2 error, but I do ask you to interpret the p-value. Okay. Question 8 comes from chapter 2, 3, or 4. Again, I'm not telling you which one, but you should be able to do chapter 2, 3, and 4 stuff. Okay, question 9. What chapter do you think question 9 comes from? It says find R and give its interpretation, context of the study, find the equation of the regression line, make a prediction, interpret the slope, interpret the y-intercept, and construct a hypothesis test. Yeah, that's from chapter 12. Okay. A really good idea for practicing and studying these is go look at the discussion assignments. We had a chapter 12 discussion assignment, and I have a model post where I do all this stuff. Okay. Question 10 is there's another hypothesis test, and I ask you for the name of the test. I ask you the null alternative hypothesis, test, statistic, p-value, and interpretation. And question 11, basically the same thing, but it's going to be, you can guess it's going to be a different test. So that's the final exam. Okay, any questions on the structure of the final exam? Any questions? Okay, so you all know what's coming at you. So let me go back now. And let us take a look at more stuff you can use that I put in here. Here's review applets. And if I click there, that'll send me to comprehensive review. So see where it says practice classifying statistics question problems? You do want to do this. We're at the final exam, so which kind of types do you think you need to practice? Yeah, all of them. So go select all. Hit submit. Okay, any questions on this so far? Just a note, I didn't even know this until I found out the hard way. This is used everywhere in the country in AP statistics, all over for high schools and also colleges too, but especially high schools. And the reason I found out is last winter we had 2 days without electricity. Our whole servers went down, everything was down. I got emails from multiple states saying, what happened? Why'd you take it down? It's like, I didn't. So this is really used. And you get to use it too because I wrote it. So let's see if we can answer. I'll just do one of these. And then you want to do a lot. Are dogs messier than cats? 50 dogs and 50 cats were observed to see how many pieces of their dry food was scattered next to their bowls after eating. I should say next to, sorry about that. All right, so we got to figure out what kind of test this is, or confidence interval. See if you can type in the chat box. What do you think it is? It's one of these. And the first person to type in will try it. So which one do you think this might be? Okay, chi-squared good as a fit. Let's try it. So if I click chi-squared good as a fit, it's not a chi-squared good as a fit. Please try again. Okay, let's see. Confidence interval for 2 independent. Okay, confidence interval for 2 independent. Confidence interval for independent samples. That's this guy. Okay, notice that you want to make a decision, not an estimate. Not estimate a value, right? So notice the first word is R. Does that make sense? There's not a confidence interval or prediction interval. Please try again. So the idea, now you have a little guide on what it might send you to. There's a little bit of AI built into this that I wrote. Okay, so what else do you think it could be? We'll get there. We know it's not a confidence interval. Any thoughts? Hoping you'll tell me. Okay, hypothesis test for two independent. Let's try it. Okay, hypothesis test for the difference between mean independent samples. Okay, and that's it. Nice work. Oh, something didn't happen with a little smiley face. That's supposed to be a smiley face. Not sure what went on there. It used to have a smiley face. Okay, and then you can try another question. How many should you do? How many of these? Okay, what does a lot mean? This is important. Yeah, when you know it. So you know it if you get them right the first time. So if you start getting like 5 or 6 in a row correct the first try, you're probably done. You've done enough practice. Okay, whereas if you keep making mistakes, then you got to keep going. There's hundreds of these I programmed in. Okay, many years ago. Okay, but there it is. Any questions on this? Okay, let me hit the back button because I want to show you something else. Remember question 2, true, false? You could do select all, and then there's true, false questions. Practice those. That should help you out. Okay, and that's an app, and this should, in theory, work on your smartphone too. I don't really use a smartphone much, but I wrote it in JavaScript, so it should work. Any questions so far about some things to work on and to use? Okay, so let me go back. All right. We can also go to large collection of past questions. I want to give you a warning. Some of you don't want to click on this because it could be overwhelming. But if you want to see a lot of questions, you click on this. Close your eyes if you don't want to be afraid. And if I click on that guy, and I'm going to wait a little bit. It says catalog of statistics questions. Okay. And it's still loading. Again, this is big, so it's going to load a long time. Still loading. Still going. Yep, still loading. I think it's almost done. There we go. So it's 195 pages of questions. Again, if that scares you, don't go there. But what I did this a few years back, is I cataloged every statistics question I wrote on my finals. And for many years, and you can go and see lots and lots of different questions, and they're categorized. You could also go through here. This is a Google Doc. So I tried to do it this way, state the null in terms of hypothesis, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see that's the hypothesis test. So this goes on and on and on. It's going to be hard to do them all. I mean, it's 100 and almost 200 pages of questions. Maybe I'll update it and make it longer because it's been about 4 years. Okay, so just note what I didn't do because I didn't want to, and I didn't write a key to this. And I didn't want to because I think it's a good idea for you to practice what it's like to take a test. And when you take a test, there's no key on the test. You're just going to have questions. You're going to write them out. Then you're going to give it to your proctor. Proctor's going to give it to me, and I'm going to grade it. You're not going to see a key. So there's no way to go backwards, and I don't want you to go backwards because that's not the best study tool. What you can do if you want is if you're really working at it and you really don't know how to do something, you could post on the Q&A forum and I'll answer it. Okay, but this is, again, you know, if you should have plenty of questions to work on because this has them all. Okay, and there's a lot. I've been teaching this class since, believe it or not, the 1990s. So I have a lot of years of work on this. And I kind of, what I do is I usually rewrite half to 2/3 of the questions, and then I grab some from old tests for the others, but 195 pages, good luck. So there's new questions every time I teach this. Any questions on this example? I mean, this catalog. And again, get a pencil and paper out. I wouldn't print the whole thing out because it's 195 pages, but you can print a page or two and work on that page you're working on. All right, so let's go back. I also did a little practice final. This started a long time ago, but this should still work. And that's a practice final. And you'll notice it has a lot of the similar things. Again, I wrote a long time ago, but stats hasn't changed much, where you have to do some more problems. There's just 10 problems instead of like 500 problems or something that were on that other practice. And this has a key. So I wrote a key for this one so you can see the answers. Okay, so that's another good piece that you can use. Okay, and that's what I put for the comprehensive final. Other things that definitely you want to be thinking about, let's say you want to study regression analysis, then you can go to the chapter 12 regression analysis, discussion forum. And I always do a full worked out problem on regression analysis. You can look at other people's, but you'll know mine was, you know, at least what I'm looking for. And that'll help you practice too. Another place that you can practice is you can go to any week's assignment, say, for example, hypothesis test week 7. You can go to the assignment, and then you can do review mode and you can try the problems again. Okay, what I recommend if you can do that is don't do it this way. What I recommend is look at this paragraph that I just highlighted, get a piece of paper out, don't look at any of the rest, and see if you can do a full regression analysis, all the different steps, because that's what you're going to have to do on the test. So just look at the paragraph, and then once you've done your full regression analysis, then answer the questions to see if you got everything right. Because I'm not going to give you multiple choice. I'm going to give you, you have to write it out, kind of like the midterm had to do. Any questions on that so far? Any questions? Okay, so I want to talk about kind of what you have to do for the test. So the first thing is the test has to be taken by Wednesday. Not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. That's Wednesday, December 11th. Most people take it the 9th, 10th, or 11th. Usually all but a couple. Some people need to take it on the weekend, and if you can find a proctor, that's fine. But it needs to be taken by the 11th. The 12th is too late. At that point, I've submitted grades, and you didn't make it. So you have to take it by then. It's almost the same structure as the midterm. Bring pencil, of course, or a pen, you choose, or both if you really want. I had a request from my other class, and maybe you don't care. Would you rather have a full sheet instead of an index card? Does it matter to y'all? So a full sheet that's this size. Okay, so what I'm thinking about, which is changing a little bit of my style, but I don't think you can bring an index card if you want, is allowing a full sheet front and back. So if that helps you, then I think I'll do that in the instructions to your proctor. Okay, so that's one difference. In the midterm, it's not as much material. You shouldn't need the full sheet. But for the final, it's a lot more material because we've had a bunch of stuff since, and you're responsible for everything in the class. Okay, which means none of you can complain about not having enough space to put everything, because you'll have 8.5 by 11 paper. You can write whatever you want on it. Sound fair? Okay. If you don't bring one of these guys, you will fail. Okay, you have to have a calculator, and I think hopefully by now you all get that. You just can't. This class can't happen without the calculator. So bring the calculator. I recommend spare batteries. Always a good idea. So calculator is an absolute must to bring. Okay, any questions on that? The test is 2 hours, and plan on 2 hours. A lot of you ran out of time. So if you ran out of time in the midterm, that means that you should practice between now and when you take it, writing a little faster, okay? And thinking about it a little bit faster, getting it down, okay? The writing itself is not 2 hours of writing, but the thinking could take a long time. So that's why you want to make sure you get that down so you can do it. Any questions on that? Okay, but there is a bunch of writing. So you have the 2 hours after that. They're going to pick up your test, and then it's over. Any questions at all on the time issue? Okay, so that's pretty much it in terms of the rules. Any questions about the rules or anything else so far? Any questions? Okay. Again, my biggest recommendation, restroom break can happen, but you need to give your cell phone over to your proctor. And the proctor has to allow it. So it's up to the proctor too. Okay. But what I strongly recommend is use a restroom before you take the test. Okay, this is better. Especially you said you're LTCC, there's a bathroom right next to the library. Go in there, do your business, and then go take the test. That'll be a lot better. Okay, and maybe you're so nervous you're going to need it again, but you might not. Okay, always a good idea. Get yourself a drink of water. Make sure you eat ahead of time. Do all your bodily function stuff before, so that that's not an issue on the test. Okay, but if you have to, you have to. Does that make sense? Okay, and also they say something you should do before a test is take a walk. Okay, that's always, statistically, that's actually a good thing to do. Just take a little walk, just kind of clear your head, not be so stressed out. Something that's I used to throw a Frisbee is what I did. And if you live in Tahoe, by the way, watch the weather report. Okay. And I think we have one in Colorado. You should do the same thing, by the way, because I know that we're getting storms back and just pounded every day. And if that snow level goes down, you got to make sure you can get to the proctor center. Okay, so that's important. I do want to mention I will not have office hours on Friday. Okay, so I'll be mostly offline Friday and Saturday. So even office hours are not going to be, I'm not going to be in Tahoe because I'm going to be out in Monterey for a conference. Okay, so anyway, suggestions, study a lot up until the day before. Between now and the day before, and if you're taking it in the morning, you should be pretty much done studying the day before. If you're taking it at night, you can study a little in the morning of, but don't study just before, because then your brain is going to be all clouded up. Taking a walk, doing something relaxing is better for like the hour before you take the test, is what the statistical research shows. All right, that's about everything I have to say, but I will be always happy to answer questions. It is a webinar, it's our last webinar. So I'm gonna go back to the main screen. But this is your chance. Make sure again that by Wednesday you need to let me know where and when you're taking the test. The test must be taken by the 11th of December. So I'm not going to mention names, but there is someone who put in later than that, and that needs to change. Okay, so it has to be taken by the 11th of September. I mean, of December. It could be taken tomorrow, but you better let me know right away because I've got to send it to your proctor. Test is written, as I said, here it is in my hands. But I'll be happy to answer any questions now if you have any. I'll also be checking Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the boards very often, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, not so much. And then I'll be back checking a lot Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. And after Wednesday, class is over. I think within a day or two, you can't even get into the class anymore because the college shuts it down. Just let you know. So if there's questions, this is a really good time. And I'll be very happy to answer. And again, the one person who's here, but I don't like to mention names, but who asked for suggestions, take a look, I emailed back, and there's some suggestions. I don't give a webinar next week, if that's what you're talking about. If you're talking about this Monday, I already gave it, here we are. I don't give one next week because some people have already taken the final and the class is over. So this is it. That's why I do the final review today. Yeah, so I don't feel, so finals week is just for the final exam. And that's all that happens. I mean, I'll check the Q&A board. Okay. And again, make sure that you, you do the discussion board assignment. It's so easy. Don't lose points. Okay, you're just doing something silly if you lose points. Okay, any other questions? Any other questions? Always happy to answer questions. And if there's no questions, we can say goodnight. And I can say thank you for, being polite to each other and working together. Any other questions? Sure. Alex, you have a quick problem? I think you mean like a statistics problem, not like a life problem, right? Yeah. You could talk too,
Up against it. All right.
All right, have a good night, Warren. Okay, dice rolled 3 times. So check it out. Here's my dice. I just rolled them 3 times. Okay? Okay. What's the probability of showing a 5 on every roll? So one of the nice things about die rolling is that if I roll a die and I get, say, a 5, and I roll it again, that doesn't change the probability of getting the next one being a 5. Do you agree?
Yeah.
So the nice thing is we're talking independent.
So it'd be 1 out of 6, right? If you roll it 3 times.
1 out of 6 for the first one, right?
Okay.
1 out of 6 for the second one. 1 out of 6 for the third one. Do you agree?
Uh-huh.
And then we have something called the multiplication principle. Do you remember that?
Yeah. It should be 6 times 3 is 18.
No. It's 1 out of 6 times 1 out of 6 times 1 out of 6.
Oh.
So it's 1 out of 6 times 6 times 6.
Oh, okay. I
Which is, you don't have to know that, but it's 1 out of 216 if you can do arithmetic.
Oh, okay.
But you have a calculator, you don't have to do that. Does that make total sense?
Yeah, I just got to work on it. Yeah, it's just been a long time. I haven't.
Yeah, it's been a while, and you want to work on, little this, little that. The final, if you look at the structure, there's a lot more on hypothesis testing. So make sure you go to hypothesis testing.
So try not to focus too much on that.
I would first make sure you're good with hypothesis testing, and then go back and look at some of the other stuff. But make sure you're good at the newer stuff.
Okay, yeah, that's what I've been kind of working on.
Okay, the test does have, there are 2 questions out of the 11 or something on the first few chapters.
Okay.
And all the rest of them are on the later chapters. So, those two questions, that's some points. But if you don't know hypothesis testing, you won't pass. You have no chance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you don't know the other stuff, you probably won't get an A, but you'll still pass. Do you see the difference?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to pass it at this point.
Yeah. But still, it'd be nice to get an A, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah. And so again, go look at the other stuff, but after you've already mastered ANOVA, regression analysis,
Just kind of go backwards.
chi-squared, and hypothesis testing for these samples, because that's more of the test. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's because you have done it. And then there are two problems on the other. And the true false is a little of this, a little of that.
Yeah, and another question there while I have you. There's some questions that say the sample population, and there's when we have to answer like the last part of like the if you get like the p-value is lower, like you fail to reject or you reject. There are some questions that talk about the sample mean. Let me try to find one real quick. Let me pull
Okay, yeah, I need to hear, and then I can help you out.
Yeah, just real tricky stuff. Let's see.
I'm not quite following exactly what you're asking.
Let's see. And I was trying to talk to tutors about it, but they were kind of scratching their heads too. Let's see. If I
Is that tutors online or tutors in Tahoe?
here at the college. Yeah.
LTCC?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There's also the online tutors too,
Yeah, and I haven't had a chance to try them. I should have.
Yeah. And they're 24/7 supposedly.
Okay, let's see here if I can find
But I'm of course, right now I can help you for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Let me pull one up. Let's see. Okay, hypothesis tests.
And if you have it on a computer, you could share your desktop. Do you know that?
Oh yeah. How do we do
And I
that?
can see it. If I'm sharing, you can't share, but if I'm not sharing, which I'm not, you can actually share.
Okay, let's see. Is there a certain button I press for that?
I think it says share. The green with a little arrow box with an arrow. That's what it says on mine, at least.
Let's see here.
And then it's going to ask you which application you're going to share, and you choose the one.
Where is it? There we go. Is it showing you, Larry, here? What?
It's trying. It's working on it. Looks like it's slow.
Let's
It says you started sharing the screen, and I'm getting black.
see.
So it might be an internet connection thing.
Let's see here.
Interesting. I'm just getting black.
Oh man, let me.
So maybe you can read it for now. Okay, I just lost it.
Let's see. Oh, let's see. Let's try it again.
Okay.
Still black.
Still black. Let's give it a minute or so. Maybe you could read it, and then maybe it'll come up as you're talking. We'll see.
Okay, let's see.
What's the question say?
Let me grab it real quick. Let's see.
Did you find it?
Yeah, so one of the answers was if the population mean running time with music is the same as the population mean, without, sorry, if the population mean running with music is the same as the population mean running time without music, and if another 9 runners compete in the 10K with and without music, then there would be a 5% chance we would end up falsely concluding that the sample mean running times with music and without music for these 9 runners differ from each other. That was that was the wrong answer, but the right answer was kind of the same thing, the same exact wording, but it goes And if another 9 runners compete with and without music, and there will be a 5% chance that we would end up falsely concluding that the population mean running time with music is greater than the population mean running time without music. So my question is like, I'm just
That has to do with H1.
H1.
Yeah, the alternative hypothesis.
Yeah, I just didn't know which one to choose at that time.
Right. So the idea here is that it's in general, if you want to interpret the level of significance, it's that if the null hypothesis is true, so in this case, if the two population means are the same, and if you did another study, then there would be the level of significance chance that you'd end up concluding H1.
Okay.
So if H1 is that mu1 is greater than mu2, then you'd be saying that the population mean is greater than. Do you see? If H1 is that mu1 is not equal to mu2, then you'd finish by saying you'd conclude that they're not the same or they're different. Do you see?
Okay.
So again, I can't see the problem, but my guess is your H1 was that the first population mean, so with running, was higher than without running. Does it sound right?
Try to share one more time, Larry. If not, then we'll just leave it alone here. Let's see.
Yeah, unfortunately, the sharing didn't work the first 2 tries. And I'm not exactly sure what happened. It looked like it was trying. And again, it could be, I had it flashed for a second.
It flashed for a second, huh? Let me,
off.
you got to like approve it.
You got to approve it?
I think something like that, yeah.
It might be. Because remember, when you're sharing, you're giving me some information that could be personal or whatever. I got it.
You got it? You see
so now scroll down a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. Okay. So take a look at H1. Do you see?
Yeah.
It says mu d is greater than 0. So that means that in the level of significance interpretation, you're going to say if H naught is true, so if the mean difference was 0, so if they're the same, right? And if you did another study, and there are 9 of these, so of 9 different people, right? With and without running time, with and without music. Then there'd be was it 5%? Where's your level of significance?
Want me to scroll down?
5%. There'd be a 5% chance that H1 is true, that you conclude that H1 is true wrongly, and that means the mean is greater than 0. Does that make sense? So with music is greater than without music.
Okay.
Are you following that logic?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. It's just these ones just really throw me off.
Yeah, and the one that you thought was right had a different from instead of a greater than.
Yeah. I mean, now they're corrected, but before I think I picked like the opposite ones.
But if you look at the wrong answer, it has the word differ from each other. Do you see that?
Different from each other.
See, it says the very end of that first bullet, it says 9 runners differ from each other.
Okay.
Okay.
So when it says differ from each other, would that mean that they'd have to be like a independent?
No, differ from each other would mean that H1 had a not equal to sign instead of a greater than sign.
Oh, okay. So I got to focus on those signs.
And there's a second problem with the first bullet, actually. There's actually 2 issues with it. The second issue is the word sample. Here it says concluding the sample mean running time. Do you see that?
Okay, so when are we ever going to use like a sample mean?
That's the p-value interpretation.
Okay.
So if you look at the p-value interpretation, whoops, there we go. If you look at the p-value, which is part G, right? Because that's interpret the p-value in the context of the question, right?
Yeah.
You'll see the answer to that one is there's a 7.41% chance that the mean running time for the 9 runners so that's a sample mean, right? We're not talking about all runners in the world. We're talking about these 9. Would be at least 3.7 minutes more with music compared to them running without music.
Okay.
Do you see that? So that's referring to a sample mean, not a population mean.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay. Whereas the final conclusion is always population.
Population. So
And level of significance is always about falsely concluding that the population is whatever greater than in this case.
So it can never be sample mean
Sample mean is only for the p-value
for the p-value. Oh, man.
interpretation.
Okay. And another question there. These samples are dependent. What would make them not? Like, what would make them independent? Just
okay. So here's how you could word it to be independent. Let's suppose that you looked at 9 runners today, played music and clocked their running time. Got it?
yeah.
Then tomorrow you looked at 9 different runners, but didn't give them music and clocked.
Okay, so I changed it up.
Yep, and you can have the same numbers in here, and that would be independent
Oh, I
because it's
see.
different runners.
Okay,
So if it's one person doing 2 things, that's dependent. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But if it's more different,
If it's 2 different groups of people doing something, that's independent.
okay. Fair
So
enough.
that's the difference. It's 9 individual people each doing 2 things, whereas independent is 9 people doing this thing, 9 other people doing this other thing.
Okay. Fair enough.
And that would make it independent.
Independent. All right. I think that's about it for now, Larry. I know I have like so much to ask, but it's top of my head. It's just
Okay, and you can always post on the Q&A forum. At least for
Yeah.
the next 3 days, I'll be answering, and then Sunday again too. Sunday
Okay.
night.
So-
Or Monday for sure.
all righty. Well, have a good night, Larry.
Okay, you too. Guadalupe, last chance. You've been quiet. Any questions? If not, we'll call it a night. And okay. And thank you, Guadalupe. Hopefully the final goes well for you. Study hard, work, practice a lot of problems. And that's all of you who are watching this webinar. Make sure you practice, doing problem after problem after problem, writing them out. And practice going pretty fast so you don't run out of time. And I'll be checking for the next 3 days. I'll be mostly offline for a couple days, except maybe a little in the morning, and then I'll offline all day after that, and then I'll be back online Sunday night through when you take the test. So don't forget Wednesday, you got to let me know when that test is happening for you and who's proctoring. So have a great one, and thank you for the class.